I'm Dr. T. It's going to be a very casual session. It's not going to be a session where you're going to sit down and listen to me talk for 2 hours. That's just not going to happen. So you're going to have to kind of psych yourself out to get involved. But just to warm you up maybe, I'll just show it to you while we wait for your colleagues to walk in, okay? It's a few, I think about 8 minutes long. Some of you may have seen it. Have you all seen this? Did you know 2.0? Some of you have seen it, some of you have not. It's a little bit dated. Let me give you some background on the video. A high school teacher in Colorado came out with this idea to kind of challenge his colleagues, to challenge his school district, to rethink the way we think about technology, we think about learning, we think about our kids, we think about our classroom. So it's designed to make you think, and hopefully you do that while you're watching it. Since then, it has gone past the district level, it has gone worldwide to start discussions I hope we will have the next 2 hours. An estimated 25 to 30 million people have watched this and discussed this, okay? So you'll be adding to those numbers. Let me just start the video. Doesn't exist anymore.
It is Facebook, it will be the largest continent.
Is it 1 billion now?
Which one?
Facebook? Do they have 1 billion users? I don't think they do.
Yeah, they just
1
just
billion?
broke the 1 billion.
Are you going to introduce me? Are you going to introduce me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just turn it on. Just leave it. Yeah, like I said, it's about the number is about 30 million now, I think. Just a little bit of background about myself. I come from a very mixed background, very rojak background. I have degrees in psychology and mass communication. I practiced as a journalist for a number of years. I then went on to do my MBA and practiced as a business consultant, like an e-commerce strategy consultant, a number of years in the US. Then went on to do my PhD. I've been in and out of industry, and then eventually I'm now in academia. I was in private sector academia in Malaysia for a number of years, and now I'm in public sector, in large parts because I love to do research. And that's what I've been spending my time on largely in the last few years, looking at how technology can enhance learning, how technology can help people construct knowledge at the higher order level, at the more complex level. You watched the video. on Did You Know 2.0. A number of you have watched it before. Let's spend a couple of minutes to kind of unpack some of the facts that kept coming at you. What things stood out to you? What are some of the points that you remember from that 8-minute video? Can you share with us? What stands out? Or none of it is a surprise? Was there anything surprising? Can you all share? Oh, this is just my undergraduate class. Are there numbers on there? Good. 1 to 23. Lena, choose one number, 1 to 23. Just choose one number. 19. Who's number 19?
Adrian.
Oh, Adrian. Oh, great. Was there anything surprising to you?
Not at I think coming from quite a young age, or young generation, I would say it has been part of my life since nowadays. So it's just that some of the facts that keeps asking to watch, some of the facts actually want something that really actually makes you think about what happens when you don't keep up with changes and trends. I thought there was one quote by Albert Einstein that was quite striking. I thought that was the one that, yeah.
Okay. Which quote was this? That we can't solve the problems today using the thinking that created the problem.
I thought that was
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Adrian.
You're welcome.
Can you choose another number, 1 to 23?
20.
20? Can you, who's number 20? Rabia? Rabia? Yeah, can you share? Did you come in late, Rabia?
Yeah.
So, okay, did you catch the video?
Yeah.
Okay, anything stood out for you?
The part where students or kids who has no access to textbook now is connected to us.
Okay. Okay, thank you. A number, 1 to 24 now, we have 24. Just choose one number.
8.
8. Pravina?
So the thing that stood out to me was the MySpace, that if it's one of a country, then it would be 8 largest country.
Yeah, and MySpace doesn't even have any popularity anymore. Does it still exist, MySpace? Oh, it does still exist, yeah? So now the thing we use is Facebook and maybe Google+. Facebook has passed their 1 billion mark, which makes it probably the first or second largest country in the world. Can you pick another number, Pravina? 1 to 24? 3? Jenny, you?
What strikes me was the 6-year-olds too on live pad. From my personal experience, right, my 3-year-old is online.
Yes. Kids are getting online younger and younger. Okay, let me just share with you some data that's fun. It's a little bit dated, 5-6 years, but I show it on purpose so that you can reflect on how much things has changed within the last 5 years. Some things mentioned on there, like MySpace, is not even in our consciousness anymore. And it's kind of a macrocosm of what the video is trying to tell us. This idea of young kids, 3 to 5 years old, using technology has serious repercussions in the way we teach and function in everyday life. And it's not just from a sociological or a business or classroom setting that has changed. In the last 5 to 8 years, neuroscientists have begun to study the brain structure of children who spend a lot of time on technology. And what they are finding out is our brain structure, our very brain structure is changing because of the way we interact with the computer. Okay, so some basics on a little bit of brain science. Our brain creates new neural pathways whenever we do something new or learn something new. But when we do it regularly, that pathways thickens, it broadens, it strengthens. The foundation grows. And because of the amount we interact with computers today, Some of us may interact with computers on 8 to 10 hours a day. If you ever sat down and watch a teenager function on their desktop, they never have one window open. They almost always have 4, 5, 6 windows open. So they can be playing games, chatting, Facebooking, doing their assignments, doing research, and reading an article all at the same time over a span of 8 to 10 hours. If you don't believe me, go buy a cup of coffee, go sit down in Starbucks, and put yourself in a strategic position, which I've done before, and I sat there for an hour and a half, and I watched them do that. It's remarkable what they do online. I'm not sure I can pull it off, but that's what a lot of kids are doing now. And one neuroscientist was studying kids who grow up this way, and what they have found is through MRI scans that their brain structure is very different from our brain structure who don't function the same way. Okay? So the change that's coming is real. It's not just sociological or business or education-wise. It's also biological. Okay? So our very brain structure is going to change as a result. In large parts, one neuroscientist said, because of the intensity in which we interact with the computer. Many of us are on it 8 to 12 hours a day. And if you count those hours in a span of 10, 15 years, in the formative ages of a teenager, up to when they come to a place like Taylor's University, how much time is that? How much new neural pathways have grown because of that? So there are some really serious changes going on. The second thing that I like to kind of emphasize from the video is the amount of information that is coming at us, at our students. Maybe those of you who are a little bit older in this room, I didn't say old, okay? Older. Maybe didn't have to deal with that kind of information intensity. What were some of the data? How many books are published a day? I can't remember. Do you all remember? I think the data is like a few hundred books are published a day. But I do remember this number. This is my favorite number that I quote to a lot of my students. In the last 30 years, we, the human race, have created more information than the previous 5,000 years combined. Did you all get that? In the last 30 years, we, the human race, have created more information than all of the 5,000 years before that combined. So those of you who like to draw graphs, it's basically for 5,000 years, it looks like that. And then in the last 30 years, it's like that. This information explosion is real. The idea of us going to university and studying 25 great books cannot function anymore in this world because of the amount of information that's coming at us non-stop. Some of the effects of that, consequences of that, is new jobs, new degrees has mushroomed everywhere. Just 5 to 10 years ago, the idea of getting a degree in new media probably didn't exist. When I went to do my MBA, I wanted to do an MBA on e-commerce because that was my area of interest. There wasn't a single MBA in the world that was focused on e-commerce. So I had to go into the university and design my own MBA. That wasn't too long ago. But now every MBA, virtually anywhere in the world, if you want to emphasize on e-commerce, e-business, e-marketplaces, you can. But it just wasn't too long ago, it didn't even exist. So the level intensity of information coming at us is just unprecedented, unheard of. We have never experienced this before. Which leads to where we are at today. Today's not a lecture. I'm starting off that way. But I want to set the background for you. Our students cannot learn the way we learn. it's not enough. It's not good enough. Most of us learn through listening to an expert or a professor talk. And then we figure things out. Research on learning tells us listening and observing are great ways to learn, but they're certainly not the only ways. And they cannot be the only ways, because what we understand now over the last 50 years of research on learning is that we have to learn in many different ways. The kids that you have in your classroom, the top 10%, top 20% of your kids in your classroom, those who are really good, they can learn any way, anytime. And they are just resourceful enough to learn and to excel at whatever they do. But what about the 80% after that? What about the average students? What about the less than average students? How do they learn? Many of them don't learn as well just through listening or observing. Okay? So that's another dimension you need to start thinking about. Here I quote several studies, actually cumulative studies. Chikri and Gamson in '87 spent a couple of years with a group of their colleagues reviewing about 30 years worth of research data on learning. Some 20 years later, Bransford and his colleagues in a book called How People Learn did the same thing. They reviewed about 30 years worth of research to understand better what we have learned about learning, what we researchers have learned about learning. Marcia Driscoll is an educational psychologist in Florida, has also done a lot of review work. And if you read all these three pieces of work together, this is a basic conclusion that you can make. Learning has to involve context. Learning out of context is actually extremely difficult. Let's think of a couple of examples. Can I teach you how to drive a car out of context? Can you dedicate 3 weeks to sitting in this room with me and I'll teach you how to drive a car without ever getting into a car? Think about it. Can you learn how to swim without context? Can I lecture and show you videos about swimming for 3 weeks and then go jump in the pool and you start to swim? Think about it. How about doctors? How are they trained? Do you think they sit and listen all day long and then all of a sudden they're doctors? Suddenly they're seeing your son or you and diagnosing you with all kinds of stuff? Think about it. Where is the context? They have context. Doctors have context. By the second year in most medical programs in the world, they are in context. They are doing clinical work. Now, here's the question. How many of you provide context for your students to learn? Second one, active engagement. Is learning a spectator sport? How many of us reduce learning to a spectator sport? You come in 14 weeks, 3 hours a week, 90% of the time, it's a spectator sport. How many of us can learn as a spectator? Because if we could, some of us who aspire to be Ronaldo or whoever probably could be Ronaldo because of the amount we spend watching football every week. But we don't quite learn that way, do we? We have to engage. Now, football may not be the best example now because we are talking about cognitive engagement. How many of us provide the opportunity for our kids, our students, to cognitively engage with the content, to make meaning with the content, to construct new knowledge that they can apply? What's the third one? R, reflective learning. What's reflective learning? I heard you had a lecture on reflective learning right here. Most of you here heard the lecture on reflective learning? Some of you, can I see hands? How many of you did? Oh, not too many. Okay. The basic summary of reflective learning is that, I'll quote Robert J. Sternberg, a former professor at Yale, who prolific researcher. And one of the things that he researched about is successful intelligence, how successful people think. And one of the common denominators of successful people is that they are incredible reflective thinkers. And what is the quality that defines this? In a nutshell, their ability to know at any point in time what their strengths and weaknesses are. Okay? They see a problem, and immediately their mind is computing, okay, in this problem, my strengths are going to play to it, but my weaknesses is also going to cause failure in this project. For the weaknesses that I have, I need to go and fix that, or I need to bring somebody else with those strengths that I do not have, so that we can work on the problems together. And that's what he found about successful people, that they have an incredible ability to always know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And really, if you study experts, that's their characteristic too. They are always thinking of the strengths and weaknesses that are going on. They are always thinking of the structure of the problem. Okay? And this skill is a highly developed skill. Now, is this consistent with what you heard last week on reflective learning? A little bit different angle? A little bit different angle? Okay. Another researcher by the name of Chris Schoen from MIT, I believe, did his seminal work on reflective learning. And that's what he found also. People who are very able at what they do, while they are doing it, before they are doing it, while they are doing it, after they are doing it, they are reflecting about the thing that they're going to engage in, whether they be doctors or designers or engineers or footballers or broadcasters. I don't know do you know who Al Michaels is? Some of you who are. Al Michaels is a premier sports broadcaster in America, probably the highest paid. And I was reading his interview once. He talked about this. He talked about when he calls a football game, American football game, it will last for 3 hours. But the preparation that goes into that game is hundreds of hours, just for that 3 hours of play calling. And then when the game is done, when everybody is going off to party, he will sit down and he will post-mortem his own work that day. He will watch the whole video over and over again, replay the whole thing again in his mind. And he has done this for the past 30 or 40 years. That is how he became as good as he is. So the question is, are we creating opportunities for our students to engage in this level of reflection? Fourth one, social interaction. Interestingly, a lot of research also shows that we learn through socialization, whether it be formal or informal. A lot of you who have kids would notice this right away. One example that I can think of right away are my kids. A few years ago, 3, 4, 5-year-old kids, my wife and I go out our way to not expose our kids to too much computer. So they were pretty innocent for a little while because they didn't know that the computer, they can play games on. They thought it's something that mom and dad does work on, and they never touch it. You know, it's nothing interesting to them. And then one Chinese New Year, they met their cousins, and in a span of 4 days, all of a sudden they could play computer games, they could turn the computer on, and they were like 4 or 5 years old. And when there was an internet connection, they knew how to troubleshoot. 4 days. I didn't teach them anything. In fact, I went out of my way to not get them on the computer. But in 4 days, just through socialization with their cousins, they learned to play half a dozen games. They learn how to troubleshoot on a computer. They learn how to troubleshoot when they didn't have internet connection. Pretty soon, my mom didn't ask me for help anymore because she knew her grandkids who were 4, 5, 6, 7 years old could do it for her. Learning through socialization. Whether formal or informal, it's real. Okay? So that's socialization. And finally, in a nutshell, when our students get to learn to apply what they're learning and they get feedback from that process, that's oftentimes where their learning really consolidates. For many of us, it remains a blur. Those of you who are not mathematicians, do you remember calculus? Do you remember differentiation? Those of you who are not physicists but went through the science stream, do you know what F equal to ma is? What does it mean? Those of you who studied biology in high school, who studied photosynthesis, do you know how photosynthesis relates to your life today? Is it meaningful? Do you remember anything about photosynthesis? Why? Because our knowledge base did not consolidate. It remained at the memory level, and because it was mostly meaningless, other than taking exams, it never got to parts of our brains where it became hard-coded. When those pathways come together, it's virtually impossible to forget those things. We forget because those neural pathways didn't consolidate. Okay? So that's 50 years of research down your throat. Hopefully you get everything. Any questions, comments? Okay, there are many, many questions that we can ask. I have asked you a bunch already, but perhaps the most important ones are, in the context of today's lecture, is this. Is technology being used to stimulate or facilitate learning in context, active learning, reflective learning, social and collaborative learning, and opportunities for application and feedback? Okay, some mnemonics for you. I remember this by remembering CARS, O. CARS and opportunities. C-A-R-S. C, context. A, active learning. R, reflective learning. S, social learning. O, opportunities for application and feedback. To put even more detail to it, we can ask the same question with a slightly different pretext. Is the technology being used to stimulate learning that involves remembering? Actually, we are all pretty good at that because we kind of grew up in that setting. Learning that involves comprehension. Learning that involves application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Does this look familiar to you? What is it? Yeah, Bloom's taxonomy. And really, if we are going to engage our students at this level, then we need to start thinking about all these things that we talked about. Because how do we apply without context? How do we evaluate without active engagement, without analysis? Yeah? How do we evaluate and analyze without reflective learning? So this is actually more in pixel form. I guess, do you all know how you do these things? Do you know how to engage your students in the process of active learning, collaborative learning, learning in context, reflective learning? providing opportunities for them to apply and give feedback, and the Bloom's taxonomy. Do you all know how? Because if you know how, then Teaching and Learning Center can shut down now. Many of us don't know how. And to be quite honest with you, I've been studying learning for a while. And there are things that still stun me all the time. Not occasionally, but all the time, weekly. That's how Angelo and I got to know each other, actually, because we sat down for lunch and started talking about the struggles we had in the classroom. How do we do this? How do we do that? How come my students don't know this? How do we get them through that process? How do we teach them how to do research? And this is a real challenge. And I want to put this question front and center for you because most educators at tertiary level don't take this question seriously. Because and research shows this, most academics at tertiary institutions see themselves as engineers, scientists, journalists, pharmacists, doctors, and primarily, and at the secondary level, only do they think about themselves as teachers. So this question attempts to put your role as teachers front and center first. Okay? So I'm going to suggest something. We're going to explore something. We're going to engage in a little bit of learning in context and in a little bit of active learning. I'm going to introduce to you a heuristics, or a way of thinking. It's a very simple heuristics for thinking about how to engage in teaching and learning with technology. It's going to be in a table form, matrix, and I'm showing the first two columns. All of you have intended learning outcomes in your syllabus, okay? And your outcome should map directly to one of the Bloom's taxonomy items. Is that fair to say? Anybody who disagrees with that? Or doesn't? Any questions about this? Okay. So this is fairly straightforward. It should map directly. But one of the questions that you need to ask yourself as part of the reflective process is, how well does each ILO express what students really need to learn in this unit? One of the things that I've noticed, particularly in Malaysia, I'll just be honest. Who cares about the camera, right? A lot of syllabus are really poorly written. The intended learning outcomes are not well composed. You need to review those. Because if you review at the tertiary level and all your intended learning outcomes are at the first two levels, there's something deeply wrong with that. Even at the 101 level, even at the first semester, first year level. Because in some of the most advanced school systems in the world, this is done from the age of 3 or 4 years old, all the way up to synthesis and evaluation. The kids in Finland, which is one of the top education systems in the world, start doing all this at the age of 3, 4, 5 years old, at the kindergarten level, at the daycare level. Kids in Japan do a lot of this too. Okay? So you do need to review your intended learning outcomes. The second column. Second column has to do with what teaching and learning activities are best to help you meet those intended learning outcomes. Okay? Can you design the kind of teaching and learning activities that can help students apply, analyze, synthesize, and evaluate? Because if you are a chalk and talk teacher, what you're assuming is that your students can learn in fairly complete forms through purely listening and observation. But what research has told us that if you just do that a lot, you may get to this first two levels. But very rarely do you get to the 4 higher levels. Okay? Questions, comments? Assessment. How effectively will each of these assessment measure students' achievement of the ILOs? Okay? We know through research that exams are not good enough because exams are limited in the way they can exam, that they can get people out to express what they understand. If you can imagine an island like Pulau Sipadan, which is an ocean island, what you see at the top is the knowledge that most people can express. But below the surface is a huge mass of knowledge that is extremely difficult to express. So exams are really good at testing what we can see on top of the island, but not so good at testing what's below that surface. And all of us have a huge mass of knowledge beneath that surface. The exams are not so good at doing that, or of assessing that. So you need to think about assessment procedures that can do a better job getting below the surface. Not only to give summative feedback, but also to give formative feedback. Okay, again, this ties into the last point, CARSO, the last point being opportunities for application and feedback. So the formative feedback, the constant feedback that takes place throughout the class, not just middle of semester or end of semester, but on a weekly basis. That we know from research on learning that it's a critical part of the consolidation of somebody's understanding. Now we come to technology. Basically, the question is very straightforward. What technology can support the activities and the assessment? You notice the question comes at the end, not at the beginning. Because when we force technology onto something, into a teaching and learning environment, we risk putting the horse before the cart. Do you understand the metaphor? Or another metaphor, we are allowing the tail to wag the dog. The technology needs to be decided based on teaching and learning needs, not the other way around. Okay? Which is why I intentionally put this question in the last column. Technology is to support these processes, not dictate these processes. Technology is used to enhance these processes, not dominate them. Okay? Any questions? Oh, that's good. Because you guys are going to fill out this form on your own today, in the next hour. Oh, this is an example. This is based on research that I did many years ago on a strategic management class. Nobody from business, right? Anybody from business? A couple of you are from business. Okay, strategic management is notoriously difficult to teach because strategic management is extremely complicated. It's how do you teach somebody how to manage strategically a company that has operations in 50 different countries in the world? How do you teach somebody how finance affects accounting, how accounting affects marketing, how marketing affects operations, how operations affects, what else? HR, how HR affects the executive function. Those interactions are complex and dynamic situations. So it's a very high order type situation. Okay? High order thinking type situation. So immediately the thinking is, we either do case study or simulation. Because this is a situation where that rule, CARSO, all needs to come in play. So we need to design teaching and learning activities that gets at CARS and O. Okay? And some of the strategies that can work is case study and simulation. Okay? But the problem is, case studies, which is widely used in Harvard Business School, is limited. One of the common problems to strategic management is information appears all the time. You make a decision now and new information appears in the afternoon. The information that comes is dynamic. Static case studies can't do that. Because you can give somebody a 20-page case study and all the information is there. It's fairly static. But we want to have a live situation because we think that for students to achieve this ILO, they need to engage at all those levels, CARSO. Okay? So the thinking is students must have opportunity to apply theory to practice. Okay? In a context, active learning, they have to reflect all the time. They have to interact in a group setting. They have to learn to collaborate, cooperate, learn to fight, argue, agree to disagree, so on and so forth. And in the process, to receive ongoing feedback. So the assessment is not your traditional exam, although there is a traditional exam. They have to develop a strategic plan. They have to learn how to implement the strategic plan, and they have to regularly report to the board of directors. And this board of directors could consist of the faculty member, a couple of industry experts. Okay? Business performance in simulation, their market share, their stock price, their other business indicators, earnings per share, ROI, ROA, so on and so forth. So they are measured in a way that is authentic, real. Okay, so that when they go out in the real world, they have been there before. They know how to function in this environment. So then the question is, what technology can support this? And there's a game out there, and some of your business colleagues may be familiar with this, called Business Strategy Game. And what this business strategy game is, it simulates the real world. If this is my class, 4 of you will function as a company. You'll be making strategic decisions. This group of 3 will be another company. That group of 3, another company. 3, another company. 3, another company. 3. So there are 6, 7 companies here. And then they will compete in this electronic marketplace. If I want to make it more competitive, I'll call my colleagues in the US and in University Malaysia and say, can we get your companies and the companies in America to compete in the same space? So we have 25 companies, shoe companies in this case, to compete against each other. So you make, I think, about 10, 15, 10, 12 strategic decisions, and you have annual reports every year. And then you have to report to your board of directors. In this case, mostly faculty members and board of directors. The point I'm trying to show you with this example is that the sequence of events that take place works off each other. You notice the technology decision is not an isolated decision. The decision is completely dependent on this, this, and this. Okay? And the common mistakes we make is we start with this, and then we work backwards. And that's when technology dictates what we do or don't do, which severely limits the kind of opportunities you can create here. For example, if you put PowerPoint here, what happens? None of this is here yet. You have the ILO, and you put PowerPoint here. Why PowerPoint? Because we have PowerPoint. Then what happens? What teaching and learning activities or assessment can be designed around PowerPoint? So it limits what you can do in the teaching and learning activities that you can design. Okay? All right, here's where our activity comes in. Individually, you fill out this heuristic table, one column at a time, sequentially from left to right, okay, just like we did it just now. You have 15 minutes to do it. Okay, there are two ways we can do it. Some of you who came in earlier, you can check your Gmail now. You can go online. How many of you who registered your email just now? Can you lift up your hands, please? All the way up, please, because I'm going to assign you an alphabet. All the way up, please. Okay. Remember your alphabet when I just leave it, keep your hands up. You have page A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. Okay? So each of you will have a page. Page A is here. Once you log into your Gmail or your Yahoo account, you should be able to go in here and click on Edit. And you can say the ILO is blah, blah, blah. And when you're done, you just click Save. Oh, sorry, it was in the wrong column. No problem. Just like a word processor, you can just delete that. So once you go in, those of you who are already have an alphabet assignment, go in, you can do the changes online. Okay? So you have 15 minutes to start doing it. Those of you who do not have online connection, there's a PowerPoint slide here that mirrors what's on here. You can just put it on your laptop and start working from there. Okay? Who doesn't have? Okay. Anybody else has Gmail? I can register you right now.
Yeah, I have Gmail.
Okay. Can you just come in? So it's 11:05 now. In about 11:20, we will recongregate again. Okay? Okay, you had more than 15 minutes. So you should be almost done or already done. This is what I like you to do now. Identify a friend, or a small group of maybe 3 people at most, and evaluate with your friend using the questions that's on the matrix. Okay? During this discussion, one of the things that you will have to do is to evaluate between yourselves which one addresses the guiding questions most effectively. And you'll pick that one to share with the rest of the group, with the whole class. Okay? All right, so discuss. First step is discuss with a pair, or you can be in a group of 3. And then as you discuss and evaluate, which one do you think most effectively addresses the key questions that are in the matrix? Pick that one to share with the class. You have about 10 minutes to do it because we are running short on time here. Can we have a volunteer? That's a $64,000 question this morning. Angelo, 1 to 24, pick one number.
16.
Ayusni? I mean Ayusni's group.
This is what I got after discussing. Okay, I'm teaching Malaysian Studies MQA subject, which is boring to all students because they are forced to take and they have to pass otherwise they cannot graduate. even though they got 12 flats in their school. So I choose one intended learning outcome. The course is prepared for students to understand Malaysian history since Paleolithic until 1969, only after the formation of Malaysia. Also, the second part of the course is to understand the governmental system of Malaysia. Okay, basically, it is the history and politics of Malaysia. Political science, not politics. Politics talking about issue. Okay, political science of Malaysia. So, learning activities, we have class discussion, especially when it comes to the governmental system. Actually, there are a lot of sensitive issues. As students, they are multiracial, they like to discuss all this why. For example, Malays enjoy special privileges for also history. It has to become so. Okay, and we have debate sometimes, okay. An online forum. I incorporate some e-learning activities in my teaching. And how do we prepare students for the assessment? So we have short after each lesson and tutorial exercise after finish all the chapters. We have total 4 chapters. Assessment, beside normal test for the final exam and midterm. Okay, students' project normally involve producing video, drama performance on any historical scenes, producing video on constitution, election in Malaysia, for example. And technology that I incorporated a lot of video documentary, especially when it comes to history part. I created a group because our class is a maths class, 250 students in one class. So very minimal participation from the students. We cannot allow much participation because of huge number of students. So the group is meant for students to engage, to participate, and to discuss something.
Okay, thank you so much. What's your name again? It's okay, just leave it there. Rohaizan. Questions for Rohaizan?
When you make the video documentaries, roughly what are they supposed to do?
Okay, sometimes I play in the class and discussion over it. Sometimes when I cannot attend the class for training, for example, or conference, I post it online on Facebook group with the tutorial exercise. So after watching, they have to fill out certain exercise. So I brought the class online because whenever I cannot attend. Yes?
Yes, one more?
You made mention that you have a very large class of 250 students.
Malaysian studies specifically.
Yes, about 250 students in a class.
Yeah.
If you are to conduct essay test, how do you determine the reliability of those tests? Because you have a large number of students and then you are doing person teaching them.
Okay, we have AC test only for midterm, and that was abolished just this semester because we cannot mark. We don't have ample time to mark. So now our midterm and final exams are purely objective, which I think this is one of the weaknesses because to understand we cannot simply pick. So this is my argument, but we have certain limitation also. We have huge students, 250 class, 50 students is only in one class. Imagine you have 4 classes.
The context here has overriding dynamics that influences all your decisions about what you can do in class or what you cannot do, what exams you can do, what you cannot do. Obviously, the things that we are doing now is a lot harder to do when there are 250 students in class. But to be quite honest with you, I have seen it done with a group of 120 students, what we are doing now. What we are doing now is called a technique called think, pair, share. Followed, because if you think about individually, you're thinking alone, then you work with a pair of small groups, and now we are sharing. So I've seen this done in a class about an hour and a half with 120 people in it. So with good facilitation, it can be pulled off. But to extend the question perhaps a little bit of the 2 questions here is, how does technology in combination with these strategies help students achieve understanding? Right? Because Malaysian studies, like you say, is motivation issues. most Malaysian students already know this. Is that not true? Maybe not, by judging by her look.
The way we teach compared to the school, yeah, I do agree they know. Okay, but we do not teach the event. We teach how it happened. You know, the spirit.
Yeah, so at the school level, they got their facts.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So do they know how to analyze
Yeah.
the events? The consequences, how it affected my life, my family's life, my friend's life, my neighbor's life.
Yes.
Do they know the repercussions of history? Yeah? So, again, a question, how does the technology in combination with the assessment and the teaching and learning strategies help the students achieve those outcomes? Yes, Said.
Basically, technology is actually a tool used to eventually correlate with the rest of the activities. This goes back to the beginning, as you said, that how the way learning has changed today. And I can understand, I used to teach the same subject as well. I share the same sentiment. But the thing is, once you getting technology as a tool to engage as part to relate to the students, immediately the students can eventually, again, goes back by their personal context. So it kinds of, at the end of the day, technology is still a tool. But the way how it's been done, and of course the whole entire content itself, that's another different issue.
Yeah, so in this specific case, how do you use the technology to engage the students, to motivate the students, to get them to learn to analyze Malaysian history and Malaysian government structure?
Real world examples. Just giving them some real world.
Okay, giving them examples, but don't they already have a lot of examples?
It depends on, at the end of the day, how they make meanings out of the learning.
Okay, this is a question for all of you, not just Raizan, okay? If you're going to teach somebody how to drive, you've got to get them behind the wheels. If you're going to teach somebody how to analyze historical events, you've got to get them behind the analysis process. Is that happening? Raizan, don't take this personally, okay? So these are questions. Yeah.
Okay, in my class, I think I did not bring them into context. But some other lectures do. Let's say when they were talking about parliament, some of them bring them to the parliament and see how they debate, what is the rules, what is the, speaker, the role of the speaker, the discipline in the parliamentary debate and so on. Some of them bring them to the court, when we're talking about the court system in Malaysia, but I did not do that. But some of my colleagues did.
Okay, so how do you do it? So you can go to the court, that doesn't involve technology other than the bus drive there.
Yeah, true, but that one is...
Can you think of how technology can play a role in this? Online forum? Yeah, how?
By asking some questions and get students to discuss it.
Okay, so you are beginning to prompt and ask questions. Other ideas?
Just now she mentioned about visit to the parliament. Instead of bringing them there, you can actually ask them to view the parliament recording.
Come again, cannot hear you.
You can actually ask the students to view the parliament recording.
That is part of the video.
Okay, so you can view videos.
There are a lot of videos available on how, the parliament debate on the certain, especially sensitive issues available on YouTube, and how the Yang Berhormat shout to each other.
Okay, good. Now, again, remember going back to the first 10 minutes, we learn a lot from listening and observing. But that's not enough. How do you get them to analyze, to apply, to synthesize? Yes?
What about creating your own parliament?
Creating your own parliament, yeah?
Doing the United Nations thing. Represent your country.
Role playing, yes. So what happens with role play? It happens in the class, and then what happens?
When the issue currently debate in the parliament, for example, and certain students become the opposition and certain students becomes the government. And of course they have to debate according to the parliamentary procedures.
So you can create a virtual parliament? How will virtual parliaments play out?
You mentioned your Facebook group, right? The Facebook group can function as a party, and you can designate your students with constituent, a particular constituent, and then and we can simulate proceeding by maybe parliamentary hearing on this date. I want all students to log in on Facebook and start debating an issue that I've posted up on the Facebook group. So then from there you have input from students, giving their ideas and input as well using this platform.
Yeah.
In this way, we can get input from students, but not the whole procedure. The whole procedure it cannot be brought online using Facebook. Otherwise, I'm not sure.
Okay, yes.
Okay, I think one of the key words there in the ILO is appreciate the Malaysian history and governmental system. So would comparing, if it's possible, in their video documentaries, if they can compare what happens in Malaysia with probably what happens in some other country, the appreciation, then they will analyze and see that there is a difference between these two countries, and therefore the appreciation comes in. Would that be possible? Probably, I don't know, probably.
I never thought of it.
Oh, see, it's possible. Certainly the complexity has increased. The implementation now isn't so straightforward anymore. It's going to require some thinking. But think about the suggestions, especially the last three. The students are no more just listening and observing. What are they doing? They are active learning, they are participating, they are engaging in the cognitive activity. There is a context that's emerging that's a lot richer than the four walls of a classroom. To analyze, they need to begin to reflect about the strengths and weaknesses. So I would say this ILO, appreciate, is very questionable, because when you analyze a system, you can critique a system too. And this is not just criticizing for the sake of criticizing, this is constructive feedback. Okay? So, what else? We have talked about socialization in the learning process. And we are creating opportunities for what? Application and feedback. So now compare these three examples with just listening and observing. What are the learning outcomes? How are they going to be different? It is going to be different. But it does make the teacher's life a little bit more difficult. It does, absolutely. The first few times you do it, it's difficult. What I'm doing with you now, I wouldn't have dared to do 3 years ago. Okay, because I wasn't sure if the technology was stable. I actually did not intend to go, like you guys go online today, for example. I had my PowerPoint I had set up a website where you could just download from there and all of you will work with PowerPoint. So in the morning when Ida told me there's about 10 to 12 people, I said, okay, 10, 12 people, I can work with this. So I went online. But lo and behold, half of you couldn't go online. Okay? It's okay, but let me give you some ideas, okay? Because of my field, I've done a lot of readings on this area on how to use technology. Example, blogging is very simple, but there was a research done out of NTU who got students, Form 5 students in Singapore, basically to engage at this level with blogs, small groups. And this is how the research was set up. Some of the groups did these blogs, analyzing, criticizing, appreciating the system purely for the teacher. Second group, purely for the classroom. Third group, for public consumption. This blog would go on for a few months, and they would have to do work. They would visit the museum and begin to compare the data that is in the textbook and the data that's in the museum, for example. And further on, they go to the primary data and begin to realize, when they have summarized in the textbook, it really sounds very different than the primary data. How did they come to interpret that? Okay, so the three groups engage in the same activities. And then they measured this. In this case, through testing, presentations, and so on and so forth. Which group do you think performed the best? The group that was doing the blog for teachers, for their classmates, or for public consumption? Hands down for public consumption. Which group did the worst?
For teachers.
Absolutely for teachers. You know what I'm trying to raise here? How many assignments are done purely for teachers? 99.9%? You see how we demotivate them? Our old system demotivates the learning process because they spend 20 hours working on a big assignment, and who sees it?
Only the teacher.
You and I. But suddenly when you put eyes on them, a lot of sets of eyes on them, like this idea of a virtual parliament or Facebook or the other ideas that have emerged, suddenly it changes the dynamics of learning. And this is one of the unique qualities of technology that can shake the whole learning process up. It is interesting that we are doing the same assignment. The only thing different is for teacher, for class, for public. And this group by far outperformed the other two groups. So it's just not about technology, it's about the combination of the activity with the technology, with the assessment to help students achieve those outcomes. Okay? Questions, comments? Thank you so much. Any questions, comments? Okay, can we have another one? Kasturi, would you like to give it a shot?
I think what I've done here is very small compared to a wider perspective given to Okay, one of the ILOs for academic English is to have students to express opinions and ideas to create relevant support. So they should be able to reason why. They should be answering the questions of why. Okay, and for the teaching and learning activity, I thought a problem-solving situation would be good.
This is in a language learning context?
Yes,
okay,
language learning.
okay.
Okay. So they will be asked to read about problems, not given as handouts by the lecturer, but they would have to go into a website, the Academic English Online, where they have this cause-effect reading problems. It's an online resource. And probably they'll be able to select one of the problems that they would like to engage in. And then they will be engaged in a forum, in an online forum they will read, and the lecturer will have to create a forum, and they'll respond to the text in this forum. And the assessment will be on how well they are able to express their opinions using the grammatical elements taught for that particular session. And here, the example I've given is conditionals and cause-effect structural roots.
Well, let's cut to the chase. How does the combination of technology with the teaching and learning activities and assessment get to the intended learning outcome? Can somebody help Kasturi out?
In applying technology, we have a recorded video tape recording that can be played. The student can listen so that learn to improve their pronunciation, their information and what have you. Then that will assist them in achieving the intended learning outcome.
Kasturi, you want to respond to that?
It depends on what productive skill that I'm focusing on. If I'm going to focus on writing, then I would probably use a forum more than a video recording. But yes, yeah, we are supposed to enhance all skills at one go. We can't do it in isolation. Probably one way would be to have a recorded listening piece and then have them respond to it in written form. Yes.
How many of you have used forums? asynchronous forums? Is this supposed to be asynchronous?
Yes.
Any comments about asynchronous forums? The Facebook generation hates it. Do you all know that? Facebook generation hates email. They hate anything asynchronous. Are you all aware of that? If you ask a 15-year-old kid, can I have your email? They're going to be rude to you. Because these technologies are passé to them. It's old technology. So you have to be careful about that. I use asynchronous too, but when my students are older, the postgraduate students. But I would never, I would seriously think 100 times before I do it with undergraduates because they don't like it. Be cautious about that. So this is a situation where you begin to realize technology decisions are not as simple as it seems. If you can allow me to speculate a bit, and I hope your mind is changing as you are going through this 2-hour session, that once you may have thought that technology is a simple decision, if only I could find that magic technology, I can master it and do it in all my classes for the next 3 years. Technology does not function that way. Because, again, the question is, can the technology help you provide the kind of context, active learning, reflection, social interaction, and opportunities for application and feedback in the way that motivates and engages the student? Those are very, very difficult questions. So I imagine it happens here too because it happens in every university. Somebody at the top, that's one of the good things that I'm not being employed here. One of the people at the top will say, I've spent $3 million on this technology, you've got to use it. And they put it in your KPI. And every time I hear that, I go, do they know what they are saying? You know what that means? It's like saying, I want you to get to Penang, but I'm going to buy the technology for you to get there. If your boss is pretty smart, he might get you a car. But if your boss is not so smart, he might get you a Concorde. You know, but it doesn't work. Okay, so if you want to get to Tanjung Karang, you don't need a plane. If you want to get to Kuala Terengganu, can you go there by train? Is there a train track that passes Kuala Terengganu? I don't believe so. So technology selection is a little bit like that. It depends on your destination. It depends on your context. It depends on who your students are. It depends on what kind of learning activities you're trying to create. Okay? So now the question in this context is, you're going to take your students through a problem-solving exercise so that they can begin to express and deal with opinions, which Malaysian students struggle with a little bit. Developing their own opinions, countering opinions, justifying their opinions. How can this technology help in that process? Now, I'm looking at Angelo because a few years ago when he was in UM, he played with Facebook with his students. And one day I said, Angelo, you look really tired, eye bags under his eyes. I said, what's going on? He said, oh, I was on Facebook until 3 o'clock in the morning. I said, what were you doing on Facebook? Talking to your daughter or your kids in Philippines? He said, no, I was talking to my students. Now, what Angelo began to share was, and this is beginning to emerge in Facebook studies, is that students communicate differently on Facebook. They behave differently on Facebook. They will say things to you on Facebook that they will never say to you in a face-to-face setting, in an email, or in an asynchronous setting. It is bizarre. We don't understand why technology settings changes people's behavior. but their level of honesty is just on a completely different level on Facebook. A few months ago, I shared this with one of my friends who is not in the teaching profession. And he said, if you think Facebook is honest, try Twitter. And apparently on Twitter, they are even more honest. Because on Twitter, they know old dudes like you and I never go on Twitter. So they can say anything they want. I said, what kind of things do they say there? Oh, they talk about what their parents fight about, how much they hate their parents. I was like, really? On Twitter? Twitter is a public medium. And they do that. So if you want them to develop a lot of new productive skills that requires honesty, that requires engagement, that requires them to say things so that they can get feedback, then you probably want to think of a Web 2.0 type technology, blogging. Blogging is almost passé for the Facebook generation, but certainly Facebook and Twitter starts to play at a different level. Now, Twitter can be a problem because of its limitation to 144 characters, yeah? Yeah.
Okay, I have tried Facebook with my students. I've gone online and actually for reflection on lessons. I find that when they use Facebook, they are not concerned about grammatical structures and all that, and you find that it is actually a SMS language. So if I want them to edit their responses, if I want to look at all the use of grammatical structures and all that, I would feel that I prefer to use an asynchronous platform where they can actually do a little bit of editing, because they know that they're going to be assessed on that. But if I'm going to encourage opinions without paying attention to the grammatical structures, then I would go to Facebook.
So that's a good point. So what do? Now you have introduced a technology and the evils that come with it, which is what? SMS language. What do? I think here is where you can get creative and use it as an opportunity to learn. Pull out those words in Facebook and say, bring it to class, bring it into a blog, bring it into any technology setting, and can you explain to somebody who is 60 years old what this means? And to do that, what has to happen? They have to write it in a language that makes sense. Okay? Or you can formalize that structure. So you can use, in that process of getting them to analyze the language that they use and then to reproduce in a different format, in this case, a more formal format. Again, what happens in that process? They have to actively engage with the content. They have to reflect. Oh, this is how I speak. When I write like that, this is what it means to a 60-year-old English professor. And I need to say it in those words that he understands.
Yeah, I actually see some extension activities there.
Right.
Yeah,
So now you see the ideas grow. Okay? Questions, comments? Kasturi, any final comments?
Yeah, I think I learned something here. The fact about students not so happy about forums, asynchronous communication, yes, this is one thing that I overlooked. And the ideas for extension activities, yeah, that has helped.
Okay, yeah. Good. All right. Thanks a lot, Kasturi. Well, in the interest of time, I'm going to have to wrap, okay? This is where some of the things that we have talked about should consolidate for you. I am sorry to the other groups because I couldn't get to you. I was hoping to do at least 4 or 5 presentations, but that's okay. We'll work with what we've got. The good news is this. If we did this in a full-scale session, if all of you did it online, you could actually evaluate each other online. We could actually extend these discussions online. If you notice, the ideas didn't just come from me. It came from your colleagues too. Okay? And that is part of the framework that I'd like you to think about before I finish, yeah? So ultimately, in a nutshell, technology must be considered in relation to the context, the pedagogy, and the content. There is no running away from it, because when you ignore this, you are going to allow the tail to wag the dog. You are going to allow the horse to be put before the cart. A framework to help you out here is about 5 years old, this framework, to show you that in the teaching and learning process, there are 3 major knowledge bases in play. One is your content knowledge. So if you're an engineer, your content knowledge is engineering. If you're a journalist, your content knowledge is in mass comm or journalism. Then there's another piece that sometimes we forget, especially at the tertiary level, is the pedagogical knowledge. It's how do you teach? How do people learn? How do you assess work? Those are the pedagogical decisions. And then today, we are talking about the technological knowledge. Okay? And what research has found is, and is confirming it more and more by the day, is the most effective teachers have this kind of knowledge. What is in the middle? Literally, it means there's an overlap, or the word that we use in the research world, there's an interplay, an active and dynamic interplay between content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and technological knowledge. And one thing I hope that you have got from the last hour is you cannot talk about technology in isolation. It has to be talked about in relation to the content and in relation to the pedagogy. There is no running away from it. There's no magic bullet in pedagogy. There's no magic bullet in technology decisions. It has to be worked out together. Okay? Any questions about this framework? So, I've introduced you to a very basic heuristics. Start with your ILO. Think about what teaching and learning activities can help students achieve those ILOs. What assessment can tell you and the students themselves whether they're making the right progress. And then what technology can support those teaching and learning activities and assessment to achieve those intended learning outcomes. Okay? So this is another framework that's fairly easy to remember. 3 circles overlap in a Venn diagram with a very basic message. It has to come together. Decisions about technology, pedagogy, and content and context has to come together. So my recommendations for you. Use the heuristics and the TPCK framework as a guide. Think of technology in terms of pedagogy, content, and context. Not in isolation. Start experimenting with 1 or 2 configurations. And when I say configurations, I mean TPCK configurations. Technology, pedagogy, content, and context configurations. Because some technologies will work really well in some situations and some technology will not work well in some situations. So you have to experiment with configurations together, those 4 pieces playing together. Okay? You can go to a website like this one. This website is a directory of about 2,000 online learning tools. Okay, so you can go to this website, start with your pedagogy, kind of get a sense of what your pedagogical and assessment needs are, and begin to play with the kind of technology that can support those kind of activities. Or you can start with something that you know. PowerPoint. In the beginning of the session today, I made fun of PowerPoint somewhat because generally we think of PowerPoint as a tool to what? To present, for you to listen and for you to observe. But PowerPoint can also be used for CARSO. How? One of my students did this with her literature students. She used PowerPoint to get each group to do one chapter of the literature that they were reading in the form of comics. And she used makebelievecomics.com as a base, and each chapter was rendered into comics over the span of one semester. And then it was all put together in the form of a book in PowerPoint. Suddenly, PowerPoint is not a presentation document anymore. It's a place where they can engage in CARSO. So that's another thing about technology. It can be repurposed and it can be molded in the way that you need it to. So it's a question of the dog wagging the tail, not the tail wagging the dog. Okay? So 2 options. You can play with, go to a website like this and look at what they're doing. There are 2,000 tools on it. Or you can start with technologies that you're familiar with and work your way up from there. Start with 1 or 2 with different configurations and work your way up from there. And finally, start or join a community of practice. What you have experienced here today is a macrocosm or a representation of what you need to do on a regular basis. The ideas are not always going to come from experts like myself, because we are learning too. You have a body of knowledge here that can help inspire each other. If you can do this on a regular basis, every fortnight, every 3 weeks, just to come together and share what you are doing in your classroom, how you are using technology to do CARSO, try it out. Somebody else can use your ideas. They can try it out. They can bring back with the extension of new ideas, just like what Kasturi was talking about, and expand on those ideas. And then get constructive feedback from your own colleagues. Then when you go try it out, ask your students how they are working. Get feedback from them. Come back to your community. Share it again. How did I develop my expertise? Largely through communities like this, over the span of the last 10 years. Okay, so I'm trying to teach you to be self-sufficient, not to be dependent on people like me to come in once a year to give you some talk about something. This, I hope, gives you a sense of empowerment that you can do this on your own without people like Angelo and me pushing you or chasing you down. Okay? So let me just finish with a video. It'll take 4 minutes just to kind of re-emphasize to you how important the communities can be, because this video, John Seeley Brown tells us a story about 5 world champion surfers and how they became world champions, largely through communities of practice. Well, let me just tell you the video. I don't know if you know John Seeley Brown. He was former chief scientist at Xerox, one of the most renowned learning scientists in the world. He does research in everything that he sees. He has a holiday house in Oahu in Hawaii. And it turns out that the neighbors were a bunch of teenagers who lives there, and they were becoming kind of world-class surfers. And somebody had made the observation to John Seeley Brown that, how did these guys become world-class surfers? Because this side of Hawaii, Oahu, has never produced a world champion, let alone world-class surfer. So in the span of 2 years, he started hanging out with them just to figure out how they became world champions. Because eventually they all, a couple of them did, and I think 4 of them are in the top 10. And what he found out was that they function in the communities like what we have experienced a little bit here. They will go out and surf together, like we are sharing information here. Somebody will shoot videos of them, and when they're done after 10 or 15 minutes, they'll come back and they watch the video together, and they say, when you made this move, you did this, and it worked really well. I'm going to try to follow you. And another person would say, yeah, but your hands were not put in the right place. Maybe you should move it higher or lower or something like that. So this goes on for a few years, every single day. And then they go back out surfing and they do the same things over and over again. Then they go back and hang out at somebody's house and they debrief the whole video again. Can you begin to see and link this back to CARSO? They are learning in context. They're actively engaging with what they are learning. They are reflecting because they're evaluating what they are doing. They are doing it socially, together. And they are creating opportunities for application and feedback. Over a span of 7-8 years of doing this, 4 of them are now ranked in the world's top 10. They were never coached by great experts, so to speak. They were self-taught people by most measurements. So learning how to use technology is a little bit like that. You can't depend on the expert. You can learn from each other, create your own communities, and start experimenting on your own. Engage in CARSO on your own, and maybe technology will help your students learn more effectively in the classroom. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for being patient.